you got to put the mask on first before you give it to somebody else. I was just giving it to everyone else. It came out of nowhere, Klaudia, just this Mack truck of why? What's the point if I bring no value?
As you're saying some of these things, I'm like, this doesn't sound familiar at all. I feel very seen, as I'm sure a lot of people who resonate to this episode will feel seen, and you will feel called out.
Taking that first step of acknowledging it takes incredible strength, and take the one step. Reach out, make that call, because then that's the hardest step to take. Everything else starts becoming easier and easier.
Welcome to the Self-Reflections podcast, where real reflections are shared by real people. Today on the Self-Reflections podcast, we're joined by Dr. Jo Oravecz, whose powerful journey from rock bottom to resilience has transformed him into a leading advocate for mental health and leadership. Together, we explore his path through depression, suicidal ideation, and self-discovery, and how he now empowers others to lead with vulnerability and purpose. Dr. Jo, welcome to the Self-Reflections podcast. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show with me today.
Well, thank you so much, Klaudia, and for our connecting, and to be able to, for you doing what you're doing on your platform is absolutely tremendous. And I look forward to hopefully adding value to it.
To start, Dr. Jo, could you share a little bit about your background and what led you to the work that you do today as a coach, trainer, and keynote speaker?
Well, it has been definitely quite a journey. And prior to a few years ago, I was a vice president at American universities, vice president of campus life, student life. And with that, I've always overseen a variety of portfolios that involve the student experience outside of the classroom. And I have, for some reason, I've always resonated with the physical health, mental health for students. And besides the dorms and admissions and financial aid and academic advising and career services and community service and athletics as well, that part of the portfolio was student counseling services, student health services. And I'm not a licensed psychologist like you. However, I just had always a vision as far as when we look at the holistic component of a student's life, that we need to look at it in so many different components, and that you bring your whole self to the classroom, to your community. And it was through that for years and years and years that I always supported unequivocally our counseling center staff, and also that when I was at different universities where student health services was separate from student counseling services, I was very intentional in bringing them together, because I firmly believe that you can't separate, that it needs to be, and sometimes physical health is an outcome of what might be going on mentally, and vice versa as well. So through COVID in the United States as well, that I never went virtual when I was on the college campus. I think my value system was that if we had students that were in the residence halls and the dorms, that I was not going to be present, regardless if there was an isolation and quarantine. And I knew at that time, Klaudia, that in March of 2020, when the world was shutting down, that my gut, and I had no data on this, that my gut was, it's going to be rough coming out of COVID. And especially for our students, when you think of what the environment is going to be of social isolation, sedentary lifestyle, all the loneliness, I just thought, oh my gosh, what is that going to look like when we re-emerge? And And so clearly, and working on a university campus, if people can appreciate, is that you're managing a small city that never sleeps. So 24/7 throughout COVID and such, just trying to help and making sure that people were doing as well as possible. And it was basically a 3-year marathon of crisis management, all, seeing how students were doing, but also trying to make sure that enrollment management, that the concern of people won't even go back to college after this. What is that going to look like? Enrollment at that time was and living in the residence halls, living in communal living. What is that going to look like? And I lay that there because this was part of what happened for me. And so with all of that happening, I realized it was, in the 3 years afterwards that people are commenting to me that, do you realize, because of the work that you've done with mental health and being very aware, because I asked our team, how are we preparing for the students, especially from a mental health standpoint? And I had executive leadership that I was at the table with as a C-suite leader at the university asking me, what are we doing about the students? How are we going to help the students reenter and so forth? And I indicated we have a rock star counseling team. We have rock star staff throughout the entire division that we are preparing as best as we can for unknowns. However, we will be there. And as we were reemerging, and the challenges that presented itself from the isolation, from the lack of social skills or development of social skills of how to just interact, we were being challenged. What I also had to pause was that I realized we're doing as best as possible for our students. And I turned to my colleagues at the cabinet table and I asked, what are we doing for our employees?
Yeah, wow. Good pickup though, because it's so often you're taking care of what you provide the service in, but sometimes you forget to take care of the people that are
Yeah.
providing said service.
Right, right. And I pushed it a little bit. I said, besides EAP in the Employee Assistance Program, that is the typical go-to, that hey, you have your benefits and you can call the counseling, line on your benefits as it's offered through the United States. And I said, what's besides that, what else are we doing? And it was kind of quiet. And so I just decided, let me just focus continuing on the students. However, then I realized I don't know if this is really positive in looking at the entire workforce. I eventually, and we'll get into my episode of suicidal ideation and so forth. However, kind of where I'm landing, what I'm doing today, to answer your question, is that I had so many people outside of the university saying, you can do more. You can do more for mental health advocacy. No matter what university I was working at across the United States, I was always engaged with the community, meaning that I was either a member of the Chamber of Commerce, or how the United States education system is set up. There are board of educations in communities, and you have to be elected into those board of education. And I was elected as a trustee of a board of education, and so I just always have that value system that you need to give back to your community. If you have these skill sets to be able to help and to help to give voice to those that might not have the voice to be able to share, or they need to be empowered and more so. So it was with that I decided to basically retire from higher ed to be able to then say, where can my energy go for the greater good, for mental health advocacy? And so with that, I didn't expect it to go as quickly as it did, but then with the National Alliance of Mental Illness for in the United States, a national organization, is all divided up by states, and then in states it's sectioned off by. In Florida, where I'm currently located in the southeast part of the state near Miami, Fort Lauderdale area, it's by county and how the state is divided. And so I'm the CEO currently of NAMI Broward County, but I also am, as we're talking about, helping out with executive coaching, because of what I found that occurred with me is with the COVID and the exacerbation of so much that you are wanting to help others and wanting to help others, that it started to go down a dark hole for me. So I'll kind of
Yeah.
stop there and kind of see what you want to peel away.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it's so beautiful that you, among others, were also able to see that there would be a flow on effect, that it's not just the impact of what was happening at the time that COVID was occurring, it's actually then the impact that usually hits thereafter. And to be able to take that on and prep for it, that would have been rewarding, but also so challenging because you're trying to develop things that are unprecedented, and naturally that will put a lot of stress and strain on your own mental wellness in trying to provide that for your community. Dr. Joe, you've openly shared to me in our discovery call, but also in already our episode today, that there is a personal mental health journey where you did hit rock bottom. Can you take us back to that time and share what that period of your life looked like?
Yeah, it was, as an executive, that prior to my significant deep work with a therapist, that what I've learned in the terminology and such is that my career and personal life was completely enmeshed, and my identity was completely of my position and what I represented, and I chose that. I absolutely and I thrived as far as wanting to be that go-to person for students, and to be able to make sure that they saw me no matter their political, religion, whatever preference, and such. It was that they just saw me as an even keel, and open to any ideas, and always about learning and how can we be respectful of each other and trying to advocate for the students. And so uh with that, for many years, it was just like any type of prominent position that on a college campus, or any that when that um you are choosing this, whereby no matter where you go, no matter what time of day, no matter what day of the week, you are the brand is you, and you are the university, and the university is you. And I managed that, I thought, incredibly well for decades, and I think it was definitely during COVID and such, of that proverbial making sure that the flight attendant, when you give them, when they in the emergency drill, is just like, if you got to put the mask on first before you give it to somebody else. I was just giving it to everyone else,
Mhm.
and I took great value in always knowing that I'm doing the best interest for the students and such. And I know what happened was that during COVID, and we were concerned, I alluded this to here, as far as, will students come back to the residence halls? Will anything, what will happen? Well, in part, what we saw was that there we didn't have as many students coming back into the residence halls, and that sat on my responsibility. And like, why aren't students coming back? And so just being asked and being asked of that, and I had a peer that questioned my value, my is it, kind of, what value are you, what, as far as, if you can't fail. And I'm thinking, my gosh, there's so many different things that need to happen here, and I can't control human behavior. And it was significant, and I thought that, okay, we will all work together here, and to be able to manage through it. uh, and then and this was an individual whom I trusted, and that I thought that we would be able to work together and such. And it was just going down a very, very bad way, and I just honestly couldn't understand it. Well, all just, and I think with the sleepless nights, the anxiety, the always caring for others, exacerbated. And it was just one night, early morning hours, as I've learned that our mind starts spinning more and more and more, and that it came out of nowhere, Claudia, just this Mack truck of, why, what's the point, if I bring no value, and I bring no worth, then why? If I'm completely, of what I've been doing for my entire career, kind of, why? And so So, a few hours later, I realized, is this what it feels like? Is this what, because as an advocate, we're always talking to students about, suicide ideation. We have help and make that call and helping others and make sure you're doing that. And I always talk with my team as well and just saying, modeling the way we have to do that. And then that happened. And I realized, and I'm by myself. I'm a single foster adoptive parent, but my son is no longer in the house. So I'm by myself. And I was just thinking, I'm like, holy crap. Well, I have to make a call, because this is something that what I realize is that even with executives, or depending upon where your headspace is, it's just suck it up, just shrug it off. Not going to happen again. And then I realized, no, this is what you have said to others. This is what you've said. If for even for a moment you have a thought, you need to make a call.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you now need to walk the talk. So what are you going to do? And I'm very health conscious. I work out every single morning, and I figured, let me go to the gym. Let me just kind of see where I am, because generally, even if I have stress in the morning, I know at a certain point in time in my workout where I'm like, okay, I know I'm good. I'm good. And I hit that, and it didn't let up. It didn't let up. And I'm like, and
Yeah.
I was with a trainer at the time, and I was just like, this isn't good. I just got to stop. And then as soon as I got home, I reached out to a peer who was a licensed psychologist, because I wasn't in therapy. I just reached out, and I broke down, and I just said, I need help. And he's like, and I'm like, look, this is, and what happened and so forth. And he's like, all right, so and did the appropriate checklist as far as your harm to yourself. Do you have a plan? Do you all of that? And I said yes and no to a variety of certain things. And I think my response was more that I was scared, in that I'm like, you just, as you're a proponent of mental health, for decades, and then all of a sudden it comes out sideways. You're scared. You don't know what to do, what's going to happen next, all of that.
Yeah.
So that's what caused then the beginning of a deep dive journey for me.
Mm. And thank you so much for sharing that with us, Dr. Joe, because it's, it's something that people shy away from admitting or even freely talking about. And I want to highlight that us talking about it is not going to miraculously put it into someone's mind. If it's already there, it will be there. And if it's not there, it's not there. So I think when we bring it to our platform, and you feel comfortable to be able to explain your experience of it, it just allows people who may be struggling to normalize their experience and be able to seek support should they be at that point. And that's what we hope to achieve with our episode today. I do also want to highlight, you mentioned a few things there. First thing, I love that you were able to take on this responsibility in that moment where you yourself were saying you were teaching people what to do in those moments. And sometimes we do spiral in it, and it takes us a while to build up the courage or the strength to ask for support, or to even just distract ourselves with something different. The fact that you identified that it was something that was challenging, and you named it. When the time came to seek support, you were able to do it. And I know that sometimes feels really hard for individuals, and I want to again normalize that too. The other thing I want to highlight while we're on the topic, and I know we'll move on to talk about other things in today's episode, but when we look at suicidal ideation, it's not always about having a plan or taking action. It can show up usually in a couple of different forms. Either it's passive or it's extremely active. And what you described there is a little bit more of a passive suicidal ideation, where I can't do this. This isn't life. Why, because your identity was so closely connected to your performance and output, naturally you were questioning all of that. And you, in a passive way, were ascertaining whether there is a point to continue, because naturally there would have been some feelings of defectiveness or lack of value, and that naturally was sparking these passive thoughts of not wanting to be here. There didn't sound, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it didn't sound like there was a plan or anything like that. It was just that something didn't feel right, and continuing didn't feel like the most appropriate thing. Whereas when we look at suicidal ideation that's active, that does include specific thoughts of ending one's life. And when we're able to differentiate the two, we can definitely start to help individuals or help ourselves those identify those early signals of emotional pain. And we do encourage, don't ignore them. Please seek support, because early intervention can actually open up conversations and allow for connection and support. It does, and it doesn't have to be from health professionals, you know. And I love that you felt comfortable to go to someone that is a registered psychologist, but that doesn't mean that you need to. So I want to also highlight that for our community, that honestly, connecting with absolutely anyone. And if you don't feel comfortable connecting with people that you know, connect with a stranger. And we'll definitely, as always, be putting a lot of services and support lines in our description below if at any point anyone does experience a crisis for themselves.
Yep. No, I absolutely agree. And when we get to that point, because even what I'm doing now is even training and all of that. And I have to say, going back, that, yeah, I think it was definitely more passive than active. I know that I was thinking of certain things or how or what, but it wasn't predominantly that. It was just because I was asked the question, do you have a plan and such? I was like, well, I was kind of thinking here. However, I just settled back on the more passive, that I just don't like why these thoughts even came in. Was incredible. Was just scary. I'm like, there's something that's going on here that I've got to figure out what. So it does, because again, I'm not gonna have this idea again. It just takes one, and that's what I was pretty much set on.
Yeah. Dr. Joe, many leaders or high achievers do struggle with admitting they're not okay due to fear of stigma. How did you overcome that? How did you overcome the internal and external barriers to seeking help?
Well, I think it was because of my role, and being probably the key leader at the C-suite, about student and mental health. It was that I was the one constantly thinking about that I realized I have more of an opportunity. Well, first I just gotta do it. Just you talk about it, now just do it. Because if you don't, that's BS. And so, and that's where what I found, I needed to then, and this is in part kind of our whole topic here of executive mental health, I wanted to find some sort of support program for professional mental health. I mean, and I didn't want to dissuade, kind of, if it was every day, for that. And it wasn't substance abuse either. It was mental health. And I couldn't just go into a program where it was just so a lot of random people. I knew the support group that I needed were other executives, others that have a significant responsibility, so that so we could relate, and to be able to do that. And that was hard to find. It was so, and this is why I think I'm even more passionate about the topic, because it was so hard. And I finally found an amazing center, and it was residential. And at first, my colleague who was helping me, he said, kind of, it's maybe just a PHP or kind of a 7 to 10 day kind of reset. That's what you need to find. I'm like, okay. And he's like, and not in this area where the university. He's like, it's got to be. And I'm like, okay, I'm with you on that. So I was starting to research and so forth. And with the one that I've ultimately settled in on, at first, the first intake, or at least the first question, and this was over a holiday, an American holiday weekend. It happened on a Friday. and a Thursday night, Friday morning, and then it was the holiday weekend, a long weekend. And so trying to manage through myself with all of that. And uh, then when I connected with this one facility, they said, well, it's minimum of 30 days. And I'm thinking, I don't need 30 days. I just need a week to 10 days. And I'm thinking, with all my responsibility, I can't manage all 30 days. And they're like, yeah, no, 30 days. and and I'm like, I don't know. And so then I check with my insurance and so forth to see what is possible and all of that. Regardless, then they did the full intake, and then I had to wait for the decision. I want to make sure that the licensed psychologists on the entire team of their experience with professional, and it was all this curriculum for professional mental health. And I'm like, oh my God. And the other, so I got the call. Yeah, you're in. When can you get here? And so I just needed some time to share with my university president and with my team. And then to be able to, it took some time just to get life situated, just go for 30 days. So long story short, getting there, and my first group therapy was CEO, surgeon, FBI agent. It was just amazing. And everyone is saying the same exact thing. And burnout, depression, anxiety. Definitely, I'd say half the group, it was co-occurring with substance abuse and mental health. But for there, I was just like, for the first time in my entire life and career, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
And it was just shocking to me to see those of us that were just saying, yeah, this is just absolutely amazing that we have found this place. And then number two, it's ridiculous that we get to this point.
Mm.
So that's kind of where I realized through the 30 days and intense work, because it was about 6 hours of therapy, either individual and or group therapy and such. And I was, definitely one. There was a few that were in there that were told that they needed to be there. But I'm just like, I'm in from day one as far as let's get this going here. And so it's so appropriately ingrained and kind of just saying, okay, there's a lot of work. And my therapist team said there's a lot of untangling that needs to happen. I'm like, all right. And I know that it's just not going to be 30 days. This is going to be for the long haul. But to understand what has caused this, and what needs to shift or change, because I have a choice of going back to it, and with relapse, and relapse is going back into workaholism. And so that was in part a significant part of really figuring out who's Joe, who, as
Mm.
a, we don't have the title. And so
Mm.
that's kind of a lot there.
Yeah. And for executives and high achievers, the pressure to perform can actually be relentless, often, as you mentioned, Dr. Joe, to burnout and extremely high mental health crises. And when we look at these high stake environments, seeking help can feel like admitting failure. So sometimes it does get to breaking point before many individuals then seek support. But the truth is, when you actually prioritize and take time for mental well-being, it's actually a significant and powerful act of leadership. When we look at residential mental health programs, yes, they are rare, and yes, it takes time to find one specific to your needs. But when you do, it does provide a safe, immersive space to disconnect, reflect, but also heal away from the pressures that had actually led you to develop the problematic behaviors, limiting beliefs, and the immense stress that had led to that break. And not everyone is going to be able to afford or get to a residential program, of course. However, at the same time, we want to acknowledge that there is no shame, and we'll talk about shame in a moment, but there is no shame in stepping into a program where you can actually pull away layer of these facades that lead to the identity that you've been grasping onto up until that point that actually has now gotten so rigid and so intense that it's actually the thing that is hurting you. So by investing in your mental health, leaders don't just recover, they actually are able to go back into their roles a lot stronger, potentially more attuned to who they are outside of that identity, and better equipped to actually inspire their teams. So I want to normalize seeking help for executives, high achievers, and professionals because it is essential. As hard as it is to cut out 30 days or 2 weeks or 2 months, depending on the program and the service that is available, it is an essential step towards sustainable success.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. And this is where I'm at right now is just, I'm just trying to work with executives. And, I think it's, to an extent, it's also generational. And where I'm saying with that is just, I think the more, older seasoned executives just like, just suck it up, just we just deal with it and such. And the younger, and me being a part of a university environment, knowing the students in that are graduating and they're so embracing the mental health and understanding it and boundaries and such, there's now that generational dissonance when the hiring authorities are seasoned, and the younger generation coming on in just saying, I have expectations about boundaries and the environment and such, and others are just like, how do we manage that? Going back to the residential, and that's what I really would wish others having that opportunity. I don't wish it upon anyone to get to that point to then have to do that. But it is that recognizing, and I think slowly with a lot of celebrities or athletes that are saying that we have to put our mental health first. And that's why I'm now wanting to have those conversations with corporate execs saying, and there is research now, even NAMI has done this, is that the workforce is waiting for the C-suite to acknowledge and to give permission about, rather than being performative for mental health and well-being, what are we doing about it? And that's where I really have found my voice, is to, through my own personal experience, that if a leader is able to come forward, or those that are in leadership positions are able to come forward and be authentic and just say, I have struggled. And now I'm doing something about it. I'm putting myself first. I'm walking the talk. That it is, if I'm able to have one person to say, if he was able to do that and getting support from the top leadership, then I wanna be able to say that I need help too.
I'm curious, you engaged in a 30-day program. Was it the only thing you needed to do to get back into the world and everything was, able to be managed? Or was there additional work that you also needed to engage in thereafter?
Oh, it was absolutely thereafter, because in part, there are some execs that were going to be staying there for 6 weeks or 8 more weeks, or for more additional weeks and such. Um, and so what, and again, it was just a wonderful program to how it was a step down. So you go from the residential for 30 days, and then when you leave, then you have an intensive outpatient program. And for me, and so that meant, and they said, do not go back to work full time immediately
Mm,
after that. And I'm like, what are you
that's
talking
so
about?
good that
Why?
they did that.
I'm like, why? And in part, I was scared. I was scared going back, because throughout this whole intensive 30-day program, and we were all talking about it, is just like, we were the ones doing the work. We were, I mean, and
Of
I was
course you would, because
concerned.
you're perfectionists.
Right.
It's like,
We
we're
were
going to
doing
get
the
a
work.
gold star.
Right. We were doing the work, the deep dive, psychologically. And then I'm seeing, part of a lot of the issues, the environmental, is the work environment. No one's doing the work back there.
No.
So
And
So
that's what that was my question, right? Because
yeah,
we want to acknowledge that it's not just you stepping away from the environment and doing the work somewhere else. You need to be mindful of all the things that are contributing to how you are currently feeling. And I love
yes,
that you've taken us
yes,
to identifying
yes.
that the environment is just as damaging.
Oh my gosh. And that's clearly because it is, we're very prideful as far as, I think this is in any C suite, quite honestly. Because I've been in a lot of them at a variety of different universities. There is that badge of honor, and reinforced by senior leadership. We're workaholics. We're type A personalities, and I love that. Kind of, yes, we just go 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 go, and I'm thinking, and this is what caused it. And no one is saying that. No one will say that. And that's what I
Mm-hmm.
realized. No one is going to say it. So how can I use my horrific experience now and the deep work that I'm doing to be able to now put it out there? Because no one will acknowledge it, even if I say it as a consultant and so forth in a different way. As far as why do we not? And I'm not looking for an answer as far as acknowledge this because of the detriment. Because when I am talking with other colleagues now in universities and such afterwards, that those that I've really relied on, and this is quite honestly, Klaudia, this is the first time that anyone's going to be hearing this. So this is kind of an aha for a lot of people. Is that others that are still in those positions that I was in are significantly under pressure and significantly in therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just like, and they said, because Joe, I saw what you did. And
Mm.
I'm like, okay, this is, and so in part going back to an environment, and that the other piece is that they think, and to an extent, if we were all thinking this in a residential, is that now you're fixed.
Mm.
You left. It's just like, okay, well, you had surgery and now you're healing. And then and so it absolutely, well, okay, you're good, you're back for after 30 or whatever. And so that's kind of to an extent that they said, this is a slow roll back. You have to go part-time. And then I realized when I did go back to the office part-time, I was shocked as far as how exhausted I was, even working part-time. I'm like, holy cow. And that just gave me more of an awareness of when people have taken the step of more deep dive mental health, well-being, what needs to happen. And when you think of a supportive, holistic corporate work environment, this is what it means. And you're not able to really talk about it unless you've lived it from an executive level and going through a mental health journey. And this is to an extent why I wanted to branch into the executive coaching and stuff, because there's tons of executive coaches that are out there that have not been at the C-suite level, that are licensed psychologists, however, never been at the C-suite level, do not know the pressures that are upon that, but want to help coach through that. And I'm thinking, there's more. There's more to this to be able to relate and to understand. So it was definitely eventually when I went back to full time, I still had peers, and still to this day from the residential, that said, are you going back? Are you going back full time? Are you really doing it? Because
Mm.
Joe, remember, this is a life or death,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
I needed them to say that to me to reinforce as far as how are you going to have the boundaries and such. So going back to the step down, so like 8 weeks of IOP, with a 6 hours of therapy a week, because I thought I don't need this, I just, holy cow, yeah. And then a step down from there, about 2 hours a week, and then just one-on-one therapy, and such. And that was having that, and to this day, I still have therapy every other week, and I will always have that. And there's an alumni network that we meet every other week on Zoom, and it's just facilitated because we all have had that experience of the residential, and we're just trying to, accountability. How are you doing? And it's shocking to see those that have had relapses and those that are
Yeah.
making incredible progress.
And thank you so much for sharing that, because it normalizes the journey where it isn't just one stay. Look, are the unicorn experiences where one stay really reshapes someone's viewpoint and they create immense change in their world. And others, majority of us, do need ongoing support to be able to help um, reshift years upon years upon years of ingrained beliefs and ingrained behaviors that only just reinforce the environment that we live in. And being able to, experience something that is traumatic, because getting to a rock bottom where you are dabbling whether or not life is worth living, that is a traumatic incident, right? And I want to bring up the concept of post-traumatic growth, or PTG. It's a concept I wanted to highlight in today's episode because it has the potential for profound personal development when we have a trauma or a crisis. And I want to separate that from resilience, because resilience is about bouncing back. PTG is about growing beyond one's previous state. And that's what I'm hearing you
Mm.
started to develop. And I want to learn a little bit more about what your identity turned into thereafter. But when we experience PTG, we find a deeper appreciation for life, stronger personal relationships, and a renewed sense of purpose. And I'm hearing already that that slowly started to develop for you. And it doesn't mean that the pain or struggle is erased, but rather it leads to meaningful change and a new perspective. And it reminds us that even in the face of immense hardship, growth, wisdom, and strength can actually still emerge, paving for a life that is so much more fulfilling and so much more purposeful. So in saying that, how, or as you started to rebuild, what did your identity look like for you? And how did you then potentially notice this newfound relationship with yourself, with your world around you, or, yeah, people?
Wow. No, I so appreciate that PTG, because yes, absolutely. This is what I realized is that um for what I was doing for years, and I thought I was going to absolutely retire in 5 more years from the university as a vice president and such. And then I realized, because of this, and just thinking, wait a minute here, let me, I guess maybe it's just how I'm wired to an extent. Let me just step back here to see, where's the value. I'm not done yet, and is there more here? And I think, for me, I don't know what the mindset is, or well, no, I've always had a growth mindset. Number one, but number two is kind of thinking that I'm not one to wallow in pity and like, why is this happening to me and so forth. I have a strong faith in that this has been presented to me, and I got to figure out why. And now, what do I make of it? And then I realized, I'm like, okay, well, you have so many, decades of experience of supervising student counseling services, and overseeing mental health. And even as a single foster adoptive dad, and my son, when I fostered him, he was 9 going on 10. And so all the trauma that is involved with that, and the significant trauma that he's gone through, and his own residential and such. So there was a lot of things even that was happening at that point at the same time, that I realized, okay, in with my public uh, persona, authentic persona, and ability to be presenting and advocating in so many different tables across the community, and that I realized I have a voice, and how can I leverage that more? And then I realized that men talking about mental health at the level to which I want to doesn't happen often. And so it was with that, I was just like, okay, well, how can I look at mental health advocacy areas? If it is it um, through HR departments? Is it through college student services in different type of now behavioral health apps, or nonprofits, mental health, and just really starting to see, is there something? Is this the right next move? And so as I put my feelers out and let some colleagues know about this outside of higher ed, eventually, then what landed me the position with NAMI in Broward County was that it was just like, well, here we go. They're looking for a new way of how to expand the organization, and in a county within a state that's very conservative, but in a county that has incredible partnerships across the entire county, which, and me living around the country so much, I know I have a bias that I know when cities and communities work very, very well, and I know when they don't. And I realized, wow, to be able to be advocating for a topic and a cause that crosses across political religious lines, that I don't have to worry about any of that, that I can just be authentic and really talk about. And then you quite honestly don't have a lot of white men strongly advocating for mental health.
Yeah.
And so how can I, and then with a lived experience, and then to be able to hold people accountable rather than being performative. So that is where I said, let me try this and see, is this how I can. And then really my passion also is about the corporate mental health space. Is that, with what NAMI does is a lot of when people are in crisis and helping families navigate that, and that's what we were founded on, and such. The space that was not as predominant is, let's talk about mental health in the corporate space, because it is the
Mm.
employees. It's how are we as leaders within an organization. So I go back to my episode and asking, even at the university, as far as I'm getting a lot of questions about how are we managing our consumers, our customers, our meaning our students,
Mm.
um, and I never ever call them customers, or but when we look at ROI and such, when you look at that space, and I'm like, and so our employees, that's kind of what has just resonated with me consistently, is just like, how can I put more of a light on that, because the
Mm.
majority of the population are workers, and no one is loudly advocating about the importance of mental health. And I use COVID as now an opportunity, crisis begets opportunity, that with COVID happening, it has shown a brighter light on mental health. Those of us that
Yeah.
have been in the segment of mental health prior to COVID, we all knew about it, but here it has starting to become normalized and ending the stigma. So that's kind of where
Hmm.
the wave to ride it is now, because it's not going to stop. And so how can we elevate the conversation?
And what you've identified there, Joe, is this like paradigm shift in leadership where vulnerability is no longer viewed as weakness, but a very powerful strength. And you're a representation of that. You, among other leaders who are realizing that by being open about your challenges and your emotions, you're actually going to be building trust and authenticity, not just within your teams, with other executives, as well as then with a community as a whole. So when leaders actually allow themselves to be human, it fosters a culture of openness, psychological safety, and that is so profound in exactly what they are trying to achieve as being leaders in their industry. So when we actually look at how this as a whole is beneficial, we can see that it boosts morale, engagement, collaboration. Why wouldn't you? And it's so, I do appreciate it is hard to be open and to be raw and to be honest. Not everyone has the courage yet to be able to. And we're not saying here trauma dump on everybody around you, but there has to be a level of embracing vulnerability to deepen those connections and also inspire loyalty and respect from your team, from your community, from other leaders. That naturally is going to continue building authenticity and courage in the individual themselves. So in saying that, how did your personal experience influence your mission and the way that you actually approach leadership today, Joe?
It goes back to exactly what you're saying when I'm trying to articulate. It's being authentic and vulnerable. because employees know that,
Yeah.
and when you are being authentic about it, and I'm not saying calling it out, it's calling it in, and calling it in about I've gone through this journey, and I think there's different personalities, and I think definitely I was one of them. I'm trying to calm it on down as far as that perfectionism, and being very careful with the words that I use, but that even drives even more of that workaholism and such, to be able to be conscious as far as, well, the emotional intelligence, the growth mindset, the permission to, hey, we don't have everything all worked out. We're going to be in there. We're going to support each other along the way, because we're going to let's fail forward. And then that's what we need to be able to do, and to make sure that we're creating an environment where it's that psychological safety, that it's okay to not be okay, and not just to say that. What does that look like? If it's something that's saying, hey, I'm not in a really good headspace right now. I'm gonna pause this, or today I'm just not feeling well. I know meaning that I'm off, and to talk about it. And so when you're giving words to your feelings, your emotions, and where you're at, then you're beginning to normalize the conversation. So that's what I've absolutely realized. And when I'm at a variety of different meetings or advocating or presenting, that I just talk about how I'm trying to talk about it, and for people to use, it's more or less sharpening the tools that are in the toolbox, or even to get tools in that toolbox to be able to figure it out, because that's, for me, allowed me, for when I was in the 30 days residential, to start understanding more and more about what I need to be able to do, what I can control, what I can't control. I've become a huge fan of the Stoicism philosophy.
Me
And I'm
too.
like, oh my gosh, and I know your podcast that you had as well, that was just like, I resonated tremendously. I'm like, yes, yes, yes. And so, throw it all in together to be able to, and I think that's where, for we would be at a much better place if we all realized that just focus on what you can control. And yeah, so I think that's kind of to an extent as far as that leadership of not going for perfectionism, and giving permission to everyone to say, let's just appreciate where we are, and how we, all of our strengths, and together we'll be able to work through it all.
I couldn't agree more. Your mission centers around helping leaders create meaningful impact while prioritizing mental well-being. Can you share some practical ways leaders can achieve this balance in today's very fast-paced world?
Yeah, you know, it's first taking time and really looking at, and this is what I talk to some of the execs of some of my clients, is that, what is it that you want at the end of the day? At the end, when it comes near the very end of your life, when you're thinking about what is it that you want to have made a difference, what might that look like? Because that was an exercise I had to do. It's kind of writing your own obituary, is kind of what is that going to look like? And, is it going to matter that you're a multimillionaire? I don't know. Were you a multimillionaire that led to the greater good and advanced society? It's a little bit different. But what about your family? Because when it kicks off, my calls are all about, I want to have more time with my family. I want to have more time with my family. And that's kind of really like, as far as what matters most, and how do we get there? Because your employees are looking for that too. And so that's kind of where we start. And it's really kind of, who's creating the calendar for you, or what are you in control of? Because everyone else is looking to see how you do it. And that's the other key awareness, is that no matter what you say, what you do, what you don't say, has significant impact on every single employee's well-being. And have you realized that? Because I don't know if you're going to have another person to be able to call you out or call you in on it. You surround yourself by people that want to make you look good too, and you will hire people say no, be honest with me and so forth. But they will. You might have a few that absolutely will, but do they? And that's kind of where the real self-reflection. And then I start, part in the whole modules I work with an executive, and this is a little bit more cat out of the bag. But then I help identify, because I'm not the licensed psychologist, like let's here's an approach to trying to find the right one for you.
I love that, you work within your strengths, which is so amazing, and they're so vast. And I do this as well with my clients. I know where my strengths stop and someone else needs to take over. And I think being able to know what your scope is, not only are you able to help the individuals within that scope to a beautiful, beautiful capacity, you also then not then engaging clients past a certain point that no longer then serves them. So the fact that you've even acknowledged that for yourself highlights that, you're someone that clients will then feel safe to work with because they know that you yourself know where your boundaries are. And you're able then to collaborate with others in the support industry to help the client achieve their goals, in whatever way that may be.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. That is something that, it's always trial and error sometimes, that it is. I ultimately want to help. So it's that preventive medicine or that preventive approaches that I want to help before they get to the point to where I got. There's so much and there are egos that are involved. There are huge egos that are involved when you're at that
Massive.
level. Right? And to be able, and I think that's where I go back to, of having been in the C-suite, in that significant leadership, and a coach is just like, I get it. And so how do you not go down that path? And so that's what is just so hard for people to admit it. Even when I'm talking to a few that are thinking about executive coaching, they're like, well, I don't have the time, I really don't. And I'm thinking, that's part of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. And trust me, I have fallen into that, as you're saying some of these
Yeah.
things, I'm like, this doesn't sound familiar at all. So I feel very seen, as I'm sure a lot of people who resonate to this episode will feel seen and you will feel called out. And it's so natural for us to fall into the trap of saying, oh, I'm just too busy, or no, there's no time, or I might not, I need to prioritize it right now. Or I'm fine. Everything's fine. Everything's in control. So trust me, hand on heart, I have been there. I have said those things, and did burnout hit like a
Yeah.
ton of bricks.
Uh-huh.
And it doesn't, when it hits, it's not pretty. And it takes so much effort and so much time to pull yourself out, right? And I love that you've identified the preventative approach. And I understand sometimes the preventative approach is long gone. We're so far in it that, yes, you're literally in the rubble having to dig yourself out. But there are definitely things that you can do well in advance. And if you're not yet at that point where you're in the rubble and you're suffocating, I would suggest take a moment to reflect. Is there something in your life that you would like to be different? Would you like to feel different? Is it now starting to become a little bit rigid where you are feeling uncomfortable? And is this podcast charging something in you that feels uncomfortable too? Because if it is, that is your key message that something might be happening already that you might not be acknowledging. It's probably time to own it and step up to get some support, whether it is doesn't again have to be professionals to begin with, but own it and actually start to have those conversations with people around you. And if, talking to people that is daunting, because as we know, majority of people in high-end work roles, leadership, exec, there is a lot of shame. You don't want to admit it. It feels like you're a failure. There is a lot of shame in asking for help. So if you don't naturally want to go to the people that you know, makes beautiful sense why, go to people who will get it. Go to people who are actually going to reach into wherever you are struggling and pull you out and teach you things for you to then pull yourself out in future situations,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
that's the point of the work that we do. We're not going to keep reaching and pulling you out. That's not the point of our role. Our role is we'll do it once, we'll help you understand how you got there, we will help you with the skills to prevent it. And should you find yourself there again, sure, we might intervene if you need us to, but it is on you to pull yourself out again. We're
Yes.
going to be there along the journey. So I just wanted to highlight that for anyone who finds themselves really anxious or in a point of denial. It's not just a river in Egypt, but we've all been there.
What's been remarkable going along with what you said here is that when I'm at networking events that are with owners of companies or CEOs and such, and they talk to me when I talk about mental health, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we got to do more." And then within a 20-minute conversation, I just start talking about a little bit about my own journey, but more or less as far as I just again say it's lonely. It's incredibly lonely at the top. And then that
Oh,
just
I agree.
opens up the gate cloud. And I'm one-on-one. And this is why they've just met me, which I'm like, that every single one of those conversations have always gone in that way. They have all just either sharing about, yes, it's only in the top, and either themselves, a loved one is going through significant mental health challenges, and it's just reinforcement for me. And what I'm doing is just like, okay, I'm going down the right road for the corporate employees and such, because it is there. But it does take someone to be able to just initiate the conversation, and I want to create that safe space that allows them to think about. And then I'm not that salesperson for a nonprofit that says, hey, I can come on in, or I can come on in as an executive coach as well. It's more or less, let's just have the space to talk about it, and more than happy to have a follow-up conversation. And that's where it goes.
Dr. Joe, for anyone listening who may be struggling with their mental health or facing similar challenges, what advice would you give them, especially if they're stuck in that shame spiral?
Oh, know that, as we've said here, um, taking that first step of acknowledging it takes incredible strength, and and take the one step, reach out, make that call, because then that's the hardest step to take. Everything else starts becoming easier and easier. But that is absolutely, for the moment, as I did, that it just took one thought, and I'm like, I'm not shaking this off. That's just like, even with a bad cut, you're not going to bleed out. You're going to get a band-aid. I'm not saying this was not a band-aid. Maybe that's a bad analogy. But it's more or less as to you do something to and to be able to understand what's going on, so that then you can get those tools in the toolbox, so you understand how do I move it, because that's what I highly, highly, highly recommend.
And to add to that, I may have, depending on the order I release my episodes, but some of our community may have already heard me say this. And this is from some of the work Brene Brown does.
Yes.
When we, especially around vulnerability and shame, when we not speak our shame and we hide all the things that we're having problems with or we're ashamed by or embarrassed by, we're not willing to admit, that grows and festers and it just perpetuates the problem and it makes it so much harder to deal with. It is scary to admit that you're struggling, or it is scary to admit that you need help. That naturally is going to induce shame and embarrassment. The longer you prevent from speaking out, the more that shame is going to make your experience of it all so much worse. And you stop then aligning with the leader or the exec that you actually want to be, or the person. You don't have to be in high-end roles when it comes to dealing with shame and seeking help. When you speak your shame, you cut shame off at the knees. It's a direct quote from Brené Brown. And we want to acknowledge that it is scary. It is going to be hard. It is going to be confronting. But the more you do it, the more you actually bring it to the surface, out of the shadows, it no longer has any hold over you. The courage and the bravery that then grows and the strength that goes from that, we need to keep reminding people that that is not weakness. That is exactly strength. And us not speaking about it and us leaving it in the shadows and preventing ourselves from doing the real hard inner work, that actually is weakness. And we often say that that's strength because no, I'm really tough and I'm gonna just keep going. I'm gonna probably piss people off when I say this, but that's actually weakness because you're convincing yourself that that's what's actually working. It's not. It's actually, finding our courage and speaking up and owning what we are so embarrassed by and ashamed by. That is strength.
Yeah, yeah, yes, yes, yes. I'm just a huge fan of Brene Brown as well.
Same.
Just kind of be able to, how can we continue with that approach? It starts small, and I use the story of the starfish. I'm sure you're aware of it. I just share it with. So you have, it was a bad rainstorm, and on the beach, the morning after the rainstorm, that there were thousands, tens of thousands of starfish that were on the beach, and a little boy is just walking the beach and taking one starfish and tossing it and picking up another one, and this older guy is coming on the opposite direction, and then talks to the little boy and saying, what? There's tens of thousands of starfish here. You can't just toss them all back. You're not going to make a difference. And the little boy reaches down, picks up the starfish, tosses it back into the ocean, and said, well, I made a difference to that one. And that kind of, if we can continue to do that and recognize that we can make a difference, so long as we are advocating and talking about it and helping each other. It's not for tens of thousands and such. It's that ripple effect. It's that starfish approach that I think we know at the end of the day, then we did make a difference.
Couldn't agree more. And what a beautiful way to finalize our episode with that story, because that is exactly what we try and do with the work that we do, is to be of service and to, at the very least, just help one individual. And if that's all we do, well, that is fulfilling for our roles and our hearts. So thank you so much for bringing that story to our platform today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you so much, Klaudia.
What message of hope or encouragement would you like to leave our community with today?
I think there's a quote that, gosh, I think it was just when I started going into higher ed that I read. It's by Richard Bach, who wrote Jonathan Livingston Seagull, but also A Bridge Across Forever. And it goes that there are no mistakes. The events that we bring upon ourselves, no matter how unpleasant, are necessary in order to reach the places that we've chosen to grow. Whatever steps we've taken, those are the steps that we need to follow.
That is so beautiful. Again, thank you so much. And for those watching who want to learn more about your work or coaching programs or connect with you directly, as always, I'll have some details below. But where can they find you, and what are some of the things that you are engaging in the work that you do?
Yeah, so it's just at www.joeoravecz.com. And I'm really excited that your platform on podcasts and also engaging with being a keynote speaker as well as at different associations and really talking and kicking off their mental well-being so that they're not performative. They're sharing with their company, this is what we're doing, and we're bringing Dr. Joe back for workshops and trainings about how do we end the stigma in the workplace. And then also we're talking about engaging with the executive suite and managers, to be able to see it's a preventive. It's just like, how do you not get into this place? But we see you as a great component and staying with our company for many years from now. And how do we help making sure that from a holistic, because we care about you, we're not performative. And then I also, with that, we talk about suicide prevention training. That I am a certified trainer as well. So there's all these different components that I am not a one and done type of person. So that if we talk about it, it's just like I want to make sure that we're in it, that you're not a performative company, that we're just checking the box for Mental Health Awareness Month, that we're going to do more than that. And so that's what my hope is, and we're making a difference.
Thank you so much, Dr. Joe, for sharing your powerful journey and reflections with us today. Your vulnerability, insights, and of course, wisdom are truly inspiring. And I, as well as I know our community, are so grateful for your time on the Self Reflections podcast.
Well, thank you. Thank you again, Klaudia, and keep up the great work.
Thank you. And for our community, thank you for tuning into the Self Reflections podcast. If you found value in today's episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below to share your thoughts. As always, until next time, take care and keep reflecting.